It's great to see everyone this afternoon. My name is Rebecca Duchette, and I'm a senior state system specialist with Nemours Children's Health and part of the PALS project team. So today we're, as part of the resource webinar showcase series, we are sharing about our new micro trainings that Nemours has released this year. So next slide, please. As always, most of you recognize this slide. This is our disclaimer slide that indicates this work is funded by the CDC under a 5-year cooperative agreement, and the views and materials expressed on this call and in the materials created do not necessarily reflect the official policies of the Department of Health and Human Services. Next slide. So here's a little bit about what we're going to be talking about over the next hour. We're going to share a little bit about what PALS is and hear from 2 state leads about their work with PALS in their state. Next, we have 3 trainers who are going to share a little bit about how their work with providers on the PALS trainings and the micro trainings. Next, we'll jump into the micro trainings themselves and finally wrap up with how you can access all of these materials. Next slide. So although I recognize many of the names on this call and you guys are familiar with PALS, I thought there might be some folks that join that aren't as familiar. So wanted to give a real high level overview of what PALS is. The PALS project was launched in 2018 to fill a gap in free, evidence-informed training materials for providers, for trainers to use in their work with providers. PALS consists of 5 training sessions that vary in length from 60 to 90 minutes. The content provided for trainers gives options for delivery of the content in person or virtually. We've had trainers that do both options and trainers that have used PALS content in a hybrid model where some of the sessions are face-to-face and some are in person. PALS covers 8 best practice areas, and you see that icon in the upper left of your screen that captures the 8 best practice areas that we cover. Again, what does a physical activity look like in early care settings? And these practices come from caring for our children, the health and safety standards for children in early care settings. In the PALS content, our participants complete a self-assessment of their physical activity practices using a tool that aligns with their state work and their state ECE efforts. We have 2 different standard versions of PALS, and then we have multiple states that have created their own editions using state-specific tools. At the end of the PALS trainings, participants complete an action plan that really looks at their own physical activity practices or their environments and how they can advance those. PALS is a training that's geared for classroom teachers. It's appropriate also for administrators, but it's really designed for that teacher level. Since PALS was launched in 2018, 22 states have engaged in the project, and we have 895 trainers who have completed the Nemours PALS Train the Trainer. So next slide, Hannah. Thanks. So I'd like to turn it over to our first state lead to share a little bit about PALS in their state. Teresa Cohen is the program manager for early care and education with the New York State Physical Activity and Nutrition Program at the New York State Department of Health in Albany. She leads 2 projects, the State Physical Activity and Nutrition Childcare Partnership, as well as the Creating Healthy Schools and Communities grant in New York State. That's a community level program that works with grantees to advance early care and education programs. So Teresa, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rebecca. You stole my introduction. Thank you so much. As Rebecca said, my name is Teresa Cohen. I work for the New York State Department of Health. I'm within the Bureau of Community Chronic Disease Prevention, so very much kind of outside of your typical early care and education like state systems. So we're a smaller bureau within the Division of Chronic Disease Prevention. We are luckily a recipient of CDC's SPAN SPAN cooperative agreement for the second time. And my role this time around is the early care and education program manager. So in New York State, we are fortunate to have around 65 trainers and TA providers who have participated in the PALS Train the Trainer. We are fortunate not only to have SPAN funding, but we also have state funding, and that we've utilized to provide these trainings. With our first round of SPAN funding, we provided the PALS Train the Trainer, and we're able also to support them through monthly coaching calls, which I have to say our trainers and technical assistance providers found really essential to doing the work, being able to come back and talk about what they were doing out in the field, how it was being done, and hearing from their other colleagues. And we're continuing those with, as Rebecca mentioned, our Creating Healthy Schools and Communities local grantees who are state funded. We also have the PALS curriculum approved for training or for continuing education credit hours in the Aspire registry, which is New York State's online professional development system. So our trainers are able to offer those credit hours to our providers. With our current SPAN funding, we're looking to embed PALS content into the early care certification and degree programs at potential colleges and universities in the state. This is really just, kind of just getting our foot in the door, and haven't been able to provide those trainings just yet, but hoping that we'll see some success with a college in New York and be able to expand from there, and working with other, SPAN states to learn how they're doing it. Next steps include providing the Nemours PALS microtrainings to our trainers, and we'll luckily be able to have them available for continuing education credit hours also. And I have to say our current trainers are really excited about these trainings. They are like exactly the topics that our trainers are looking for. So I think I know that our trainers are going to welcome attending these and providing them to ECE programs across New York, as it seems to be very pertinent topics. So we're looking forward to doing that in the fall. And we're also planning to offer PALS to additional state trainers and technical assistance providers, hoping to increase the number of our SPAN, what we call SPAN master trainers across the state, and really kind of support having a consistent message across the state, having it available in a number of different ways to programs. And whenever we can, usually with our state funding, we are able to provide technical assistance and resources to these programs. So however we can support trainers and technical assistance providers to do that, we will try our best. It's difficult with our SPAN funding, as that is limited, but that's a great way for us to utilize our state funding, is being able to provide these trainings, and then also provide providers with resources and technical assistance. So I think I'll stop there. Hand it back to you, Rebecca.
Great, Teresa. Thank you so much. I invite everyone on the call to add your questions to the chat if you have questions, and we are planning to have time at the end to circle back and ask all of our speakers questions, direct them at them, as well as to the PALS team. So thanks, Teresa. Our next state lead is Lisa Lauer from Missouri. Lisa is a senior nutritionist at the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, Bureau of Community Health and Wellness, and she's the ECE lead there with the CDC's Missouri Physical Activity and Nutrition Grant Team. Lisa has a wealth of experience in the ECE setting as well as in nutrition. So Lisa, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I'm really excited to be here. I love the state lead calls and networking, because I feel like we learn so much. And Teresa, I think our bureaus sound a lot alike. Just a small bureau of community health and wellness. We have the same type of goals. And so I'm happy to be here to discuss what we have done in PALS. We also are a SPAN state for the second time around. And we joined the PALS project in 2022, and we joined it because I felt we needed some support for the childcare staff and the staff that we were working with. We had Go Knapsack, which was a higher level pre-assessment and training, and PALS just fit such a great niche, teaching the staff why physical activity was so important, why they may be doing Go Knapsack. So we have 57 trainers that have completed the Train the Trainer, just had more trainers sign on this June. Primarily, our trainers are from our Office of Childhood Childcare Health Consultant Program. That's a local public health agency, nurses that work in local public health, and they do trainings for the early care providers. And then also through the University of Missouri Extension, they are great partners that provide the education. We have clock hours for our Missouri professional, for all the learning session trainings. So that's nice. The early care sites are always looking for new clock hour opportunities, and they love the PALS trainings. We've got great trainers. And so we decided to embark on something new with our latest group of June graduates. And we're actually offering a reimbursement incentive. We had a little pot of money that we wanted to use. So we're offering an incentive project. We're calling it a summer workshop. And if a trainer is interested, we will reimburse them $150 per learning session that they offer, up to, and the goal would be for them to offer all 5 PALS learning sessions, and they would earn $750. And then we also, the trainers really enjoy the materials that they get from Kaplan, the large training bag. We had purchased the smaller sets, and we send those to trainers as they graduate, and they can use those resources as door prizes or teaching tools, however they would like to utilize them. And we also found in Missouri, the attendees really like the thumb ball. That's one of their favorite pieces. So in the future, I was so excited to hear from Rebecca that we could bring Train the Trainer sessions for the micro trainings to Missouri, and then also learn that other states utilize Nemours to help build out and lead coaching calls and develop a training network. And so that is one of our new things that we will be offering in Missouri in the coming months in the fall. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. It's great to hear from you, and really excited about the PALS work and training that's underway in Missouri. I think both Teresa and Lisa shared one thing I just want to highlight about how PALS has enabled them to connect with that training and technical assistant network with a concrete resource and help build the relationship between their departments of health and those ECE training agencies, and thinking about how we can partner together to advance child health in ECE settings. So thank you for that. I mentioned that we have 22 trainers, or 22 states that are in the PALS project. And could have picked any one of those 22 to share on today's call, so it was a tough choice. But I did want to mention that we recently released a podcast with the Delaware State Lead and one of her trainers about PALS. So Hannah is putting that link in the chat for us. If you're a podcast listener, I encourage you to spend a few minutes hearing from another state lead there. So next, I thought we'd shift gears a little bit and hear from some trainers that have used the PALS content in their work with providers. So joining us today are Sarah Carter from Maine's Healthy Eating. She's a program management specialist on the active living team. And she helps with the Let's Go program, which is a community engagement initiative working to create environments that support healthy eating and physical activity. And Sarah's been working with ECE providers for almost 10 years. Also from Maine, we have Casey Marcotte. Casey is a former home provider herself. She works on healthy eating and active living initiatives in York County, Maine with Maine Health, and also partners with the Let's Go program to provide PD opportunities to ECE providers across the state. She's a registered dietetic technician as well as has a background, as I mentioned, in ECE. And our third trainer is Carmen Sanchez she is a community consultant at Child Care Aware of Kansas, and she supports ECE providers with a variety of trainings and technical assistance, including business-related trainings, health and safety, and child learning and development. So really excited to have these three trainers with us today and have asked them to share a little bit about their experiences working with providers and delivering the trainings. So Casey, how about I start with you? What can you share with us about your work with providers?
Sure. So I mean, we've done a lot. So where to start? I was actually thinking of having Sarah kind of kick it off with our history of what we've done. And then, because Sarah and I work together, so we were also going to continue to work together to share what we do. So Sarah, I don't know if you want to start with the history, and then I can share where we plan to go next with it, if that works.
Sure. I'll throw you for a loop, Rebecca. Sorry about that. Yeah, so Casey mentioned we started partnering with Nemours and specifically using the PALS curriculum in 2022. So we started, in the midst of the pandemic, and so really leaned into the virtual format. Let's Go as a statewide program through Maine Health. So while there are trainers that are in local areas, like Casey works in this very specific area of Maine, our program works all across the state of Maine. So between that, trying to reach like our statewide audience, but also, in the midst of it being really, really difficult to meet in person, we really leaned into the virtual format. So we offered the 5 1-hour sessions of that PALS series initially. And we, really like you said, we've worked with EC providers for a long time. And so we try to get as much feedback as possible of what really worked for their schedules best. So previous to the pandemic, we had really, leaned into like if that would be like usually a full day session, but we actually took a very different approach and we did the virtual and we did them once a month. So we really stretched out that series. Which, had pluses and minuses. It was definitely a long time between meeting with our providers. So we had about 15 providers that came to that series, and not all could attend all sessions. So we kept track of attendance and things like that. But because we had it really spread out, we did a lot of leading into the session and follow up after the session. So we did a lot of communicating with our sites and we call them site champions, but our EC providers, leading up to and providing, links to if there was videos in the training sessions because they were virtual. And we know that sometimes, tech issues always arise. We would send links to videos that we had in the training. We would send resources beforehand that they would be reviewing or that we'd be looking at during the session. And then we'd lead up to that session. And then the follow-up would be, sort of really touching back on those points, or if someone had a great idea for a song, we'd, include the link for songs, or if there was games and activities. So we tried to do a lot of lead in and follow up in addition to that, the actual session itself. And no, I don't want to take too much time. So I guess just, that's sort of like where we started with the PAL series, and then have since gone into sort of like testing the waters of some of the micro sessions, which I think Casey's going to talk about. So.
Yeah, so with the micro sessions, this past year, Nemours offered the active play and outdoor learning environments. So we were able to take that and we decided to offer it twice. We did one in November, one in April. So we kind of hit the fall and the spring. We offered one at nap time, one in the evening, so that we could appeal to different times of the day. The great part about being able to offer it twice and at different times was it allowed Sarah and I to be more efficient with our time. And because we weren't creating different trainings, we were able to use the same one and master the content, offering it twice. And that worked out really well. So we kind of are sticking with that same theme with these micro trainings, the newer 4 ones that have just been released. And we have decided to specifically choose the connections between active play and social emotional learning as the first one that we're going to provide. And that's going to be this coming November. We're excited to have this training content because it really has been identified as a need by our ECE providers. I think anytime anybody hears social emotional, they kind of, their spidey senses go up and they're like, ooh, sign me up. So we're really excited to have that connection to active play and be able to offer that. And then we are in Maine, so it gets really cold. So we were super excited to have active play in cold weather, and we're going to roll that one out in January when folks are coming back from their holiday breaks, and what the winter weather will be in full spring. And we're really excited, even just for the photos, like the photos that are in the trainings and stuff. Those aren't things that we typically see, even when we are talking to ECE providers about getting outside. And then the other piece that we're going to be doing that we're really excited about too is trying a recorded training. So as the Let's Go program offers professional development across the state, we do have a platform where we have recorded trainings, and they're trainings that we ourselves have created for providers. And so we're excited that we got permission to record the connections between active play and social emotional learning is the one that we're going to start off with first. So again, we're kind of using the fact that Sarah and I tag team together, and we're going to be presenting it live virtually in November. So the training will already be created for us. We will have, folded in our slides and relevant information, and then we'll be able to take that training and record it and roll that out. We're hoping in December through newsletter promotion, and it will be put on the Let's Go platform. So that's where we're headed next.
Thanks so much, Casey. Carmen, let's hear from you. Carmen is unique in that she's trained in both Spanish and in English using the PALS materials, and not many trainers out there can do that, Carmen. So we're excited to hear what you can share with us.
Well, the good thing is that I can compare, since I had to do the English version with another coworker, which was excellent. And then I had the opportunity to offer 2 Spanish ones. We did the virtual, and then we did another in person. The issue that I had with the first one that I provided for the Spanish speakers virtually was the whole physical activity was very limited to do online. Mm-hmm. And they were very, very engaged. So needless to say was that I had to come up with a second one. And this one was in person, where I can actually promote the whole physical activity where they actually can practice and whatnot. To tell you that I had people that drove up to 3 hours to come and see me at Dodge City because they were really engaged in the virtual part. And when I said the virtual was because some of the people that came to the in-person tried doing the virtual one. It was great. The whole activity that they got that feeling, they really understood more. And I believe the engagement was way more in person than what you get virtually. And again, it's because that whole physical part, we're actually doing it with them. And we actually practice too whenever you have a handicapped child and there's limited access in the home, or limit to any movement. So as we had a whole bunch of prizes to give out. So what I did was, when they come up with questions on how can they do that activity in a limited space or with a child that was limited, we practice it. So we made it as a little game, and they earned prizes as we did those activities. So it was really, really fun. The feedback was great. Looking forward, if I had the opportunity to do it again, I'm pretty sure that they're willing to come back because they really, really enjoyed it. And a lot of the information that I provided that was in our curriculum, most of the videos or the music, I tried to look for them in Spanish. So they have both.
Thanks, Carmen. Casey and Sarah, can you guys share anything about how providers responded to content from PALS?
Yeah, I think just to echo what Carmen said, we definitely had folks who had said they would have preferred to do this in person. And that is something that I think as a state, we are trying to have more trainers trained and do those trainings locally so that there is options for both in-person trainings and virtual training. So, I mean, that I think goes without saying that people have, I mean, there's so many fun games and activities that doing it in person is, probably ideal. Although I will say we had great feedback. We tend to do our trainings during nap time. And so it's during their day, and for folks that they're not, working from 6 to 6 and then also doing a training on the evenings or the weekends. So it really fit within their schedule. And we work with both centers and home base. So for a lot of people, they're not getting paid to do training. So to have it in the day during their nap time, that was a benefit, and people really appreciated that piece. And then also thinking about it removed barriers. Some of our folks attending said they didn't have to worry about childcare for their children. So there were a lot of perks to the way we did it. But I mean, I definitely think there was feedback too that people would like to do this training in person because of the games and activities.
Yeah, there's definitely pros to each method of training. So, it's meeting them where they are and what they're interested in at that moment. One thing that I think is really special about the PALS materials is that trainers can modify them. And we highly encourage you to add your state-specific information, maybe change terminology. Casey's mentioned the social emotional learning micro-training that's new. And we've learned from some states that term is no longer used in states, and they have to use soft skills or use other terms instead of social emotional learning. And we invite trainers to change terms when necessary, modify pictures to represent the communities you're serving, things like that. I wonder if you guys could speak to anything about your confidence level training on physical activity before and after PALS.
I think it was great. I'm sorry. Go ahead,
No,
Casey.
go ahead.
I think the samples that we had, and then if we look up, there's so many in the computer, like in the internet, that you can find and relate to that. And to make it where they can relate and understand and make it easy, because we have to also, like if it's a home provider, their time and the setting that they have, because they have multiple ages. So just accommodate everything at once, but then at the same time make it fun. So they don't seem like this is something else that I have to add to my curriculum. No, it's just something that is actually benefiting everybody, even her, or whoever's presenting it or doing it with the children.
I was going to say that I'm a tools in the toolbox kind of person. And so as far as confidence doing the activities and things prior to PALS, I mean, I had a preschool program for 12 years. So I had no qualms about being silly with kids and moving and, adapting in the moment and things like that. But PALS definitely gave us more tools in our toolbox. And I think being able to bring in my experience too, I definitely have grabbed a hold of some of the things that really are my favorites for various reasons, and being able to share, with ECE providers, why they're my favorites and, kind of what stands out to them too. And, there's always tools in your toolbox that get used more than others. And PALS are definitely some of those tools. So yeah. definitely appreciate it.
Thanks, Casey. And I can't say how much I appreciate you trainers coming on and sharing your experiences with us. I invite everybody on the call, if you have questions for them, please add them to the chat. They're going to hang around and we'll answer some questions at the end. So great to see you guys. So what are these PALS micro trainings that we're talking about? Get our slides back up. We kept hearing from trainers over the last 5 years that there are certain subject areas that they'd like to go deeper on. And we also heard that they liked short trainings. So we did a survey asking for their top few subjects that they'd like us to focus on. And when we got the results out, we sent this to over 700 trainers at that point, it's where we were, and got the responses back and looked at what were the top 4 and worked from there. We worked to create trainings, worked with an advisory committee to review the materials, and then began launching them this April. And we do have recordings of each of the 4 sessions. Each of the trainings has a facilitator guide, presentation slides, speaker notes that are suggestions or starting points for trainers when they're delivering the content. There are participant handouts, and several of the trainings have either family engagement strategies and or additional resources to share. So you can see at the bottom of the slide there are the topics that were selected by the PALS trainers: active play in cold weather, supporting outdoor play, physical activity in small spaces, active play with mixed age groups, and then the connections between active play and social emotional learning. That 5th one is a bonus micro training. Last year, I was fortunate enough to complete the ECHO PALS Train the Trainer with the Natural Learning Initiative at NC State. And the capstone project for that course was to create a training that could be shared with providers. So we took that one as well and have developed that into a micro training for PALS trainers as well. So next slide. We are going to share at a very high level what the content of each of these trainings look like. But first, I want to give a shout out to our reviewers who are listed on the slide. These reviewers looked at 1, 2, or all 4 trainings and gave us just really valuable feedback on the content, on the photos and images chosen, on the speaker notes and how we needed to fill those out. Just really, really thankful for their volunteer efforts. They're sharing their expertise and knowledge with us. So heartfelt thanks to each of them. Next slide. We'll start with the first one, outdoor play in cold weather. This session is designed to be a 60-minute training. In the materials, trainers are provided the option to break it into 2 30-minute sessions if they prefer. We really wanted to respect trainings that states that require 1 hour trainings in their PD system. So even the 30-minute sessions we've created, we have added additional content to build it up to 60 minutes. So providers will get that credit in their PD systems. Next slide. The goal really of this one is that children will experience more outdoor play, best practices daily while they're in care. Next slide. Wanted to share for this session the objectives. We really wanted to dispel some of the common misunderstandings or myths about playing in cold weather, address some of the challenges that providers face and provide solutions. This one includes the national recommendations and state standards on outdoor play in cold weather. Some states have very strict guidelines on this, and some states have very little, but we've provided a slide for trainers to include their state-specific information. And the session wraps up with the participants identifying 2 strategies they'll apply in their setting. Next slide. And here's an example of some of the family materials that we've developed, and this one is active play in cold weather, that providers could share with the families of the children they care for and help dispel some of those myths and raise awareness of the benefits. This session looks at the barriers such as the time required to dress, the clothing required, provider resistance to cold weather play, things like that. So that's a little bit about cold weather. I'll turn it over to my colleague Hannah Press now to share about physical activity in small spaces.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yes, this second micro training here is physical activity in small spaces, 4 games to promote movement in limited space. This one is intended to be 30 minutes, but then there are some extension ideas that can get it up to 60 minutes. The objectives here are really kind of dispelling the maybe myth that, you know, you can't really be physically active, get your heart rate pumping, or practice ghost motor skills in small spaces, but that small spaces can promote those opportunities, engage large muscle groups, and really be active at various intensities. There's some tips about how to set up your small space for success, both some ways that providers can play a role in that, as well as some use of either equipment or spaces that you have. And then it identifies 4 different games or kind of game categories that can be played in small spaces. A little teaser of that, of those 4 games. There are 2 that are without equipment. One of the categories is some different movement and music options. Another are line game adaptations. So you see there's like Mr. Fox, which is a game that is often played outside in a large space, and it talks about how to adapt it for a small space. And then also highlighting some options for games with equipment. Using socks or bean bags, how those games can be played in small spaces, as well as using tape to encourage movement in small spaces. And with this training, we have created a handout for providers that highlights some of the topics in this session, some of those tips for setting up small spaces, those provider safety considerations. And another thing that's discussed is using start and stop signals and how especially important that is when being physically active in small spaces. And now I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Georgia Thompson, to talk about active play with mixed age groups.
Thanks, Hannah. Next slide, please. So these are the session objectives for the active play with mixed age groups micro training. The training is really not about any new or novel types of physical activity, because children in mixed age groups can do many of the physical activities that they do in other programs. It's really about some considerations and things to bear in mind about how to meet the needs of children in mixed age groups, such as those in family childcare homes. The training shares some planning strategies that providers can keep in mind as they plan for working with mixed age groups and keeping them physically active, such as adapting instructions for the different types of physical activity games that they may engage the children in, selecting materials based on the age and ability of the children in the groups, or adjusting the materials, and then engaging in concurrent activities. So activities that can be done with multiple age groups at the same time, or maybe engaging one age group, such as the infants, while 2 age groups, i.e. preschoolers and school agers, may engage in another game on their own. And then the training also goes through 3 different types of activities, challenges, open-ended activities, and teacher-led activities, to give some examples of how to use those planning strategies on the previous slides to adjust and adapt the activities for mixed age groups. This is the session handout that is shared for families. So to continue to support mixed age groups, this handout has a number of different activities for different age groups, including infants, toddlers, preschoolers, and school agers that families can do, and it can also be done in childcare programs as well. Thanks. Back to Rebecca.
Thanks, Georgia. So we heard Casey sharing about the connections between active play and social emotional learning in ECE settings, and we'll share that this was the #1 request when we polled our trainers. This one is a 60-minute session. Next slide. So the objectives are to look at how physical activity or active play impacts the brain. We cover 4 social emotional skills developing in early childhood and talk about how active play supports the growth of those skills. And our participants leave the session identifying one strategy they'll incorporate into their practice around this supporting social emotional skills. Next slide. These are the 4 skills developing in an early childhood as defined by the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovation. In this training, we go into each one of these sessions and identify games that support those skills, and look at how promoting the games and active play, we can really be helping children social emotionally as well as all other health areas. Next slide. We share with our participants a family handout around social emotional development from Pathways. And this material, although the trainings are only in English, this family material is, I believe, in 12 languages available. So really a nice resource there. Next slide. In the last session I mentioned was increasing active play around outdoor activity settings. And this one is a 90-minute training. It does use content from NLI, National Natural Learning Initiative. Next slide. The objectives of this training are to learn some concepts related to outdoor play and learning, identify activity settings in early care outdoor settings that encourage physical activity, and consider an activity setting to incorporate into your existing environment. Next slide. This training, in addition to the content from NLI, uses some wonderful videos that they've developed and has beautiful pictures as well. There are 30 activity settings listed on the slide. And again, these are from NLI. And we encourage participants to really think about how active play is supported in some of these settings, and to really consider their environments and what are possible settings that they might include or add to their existing environments. We recognize that these are structural changes, environmental changes, and they can be costly. So we also think about some of the settings that are low cost, are easier to create. Next slide. And I'll turn it over to Trevor to where folks can find the micro trainings. Trevor?
Thank you. So as Rebecca mentioned, all of the PALS resources can be accessed on our Healthy Kids, Healthy Future website. And I am dropping the link in the chat right now. So to access the resources, you'll be able to follow this link. And on the right-hand side of the page, you'll see a box that says Download PALS Resources. Here you'll want to input your email address and state. And don't worry about it, you won't receive any additional emails unless you check the box as well. This is just for our tracking. So once you hit the orange submit button, a blue button is going to appear that says resources. Next page, please. Oh, thank you. And then after clicking that button, you'll be brought to this page with all of the available PALS resources, including slides, facilitator guides, handouts for both versions of PALS, the Wellness Workbook Edition, along with the Go Knapsack Edition, as well as the PALS Implementation Guide and all of the micro trainings we've hosted to this point. Well, thank you all. Back to Rebecca.
Thanks, Trevor. So yeah, if you hit any of those pluses, you'll expand the accordion menus and be able to download any of the resources and materials. So that concludes our content that we have for you today. I did want to address a couple of questions that appeared in the chat, and Hannah, we can stop sharing and be able to see each other and ask questions. PALS is around the best practices for physical activity, and we do have a crosswalk for PALS content that breaks it down where The Go Knapsack indicators are found in PALS, wellness workbook practices are found in PALS, and then the Go Knapsack standards and where you can find those in the training. We also have some blank lines there for state leads if they're interested in using the tool to align it with what's in their state licensure. So places you could add your state information in there. Laura, yes, the materials are on Healthy Link as well. Not the micro trainings yet, but they will be as we bring them to the New York trainers in the next few months. Just looking for any other questions. Invite folks to come off mute if you're interested in asking either the PALS team any questions, or if you have questions for our state leads or our PALS trainers who shared on the call today.
Hi, Ms. Rebecca. This is Tina from Georgia. On the handouts that you shared for each of the trainings, is that like a separate sheet that we can print out so we could provide that to our ECE providers too?
It is, yes. The handouts are aligned with each section. On the slide that Trevor shared, you'll have under each title session, you'll have the slide deck. You'll have a facilitator guide with your speaker notes, and as well as the PD system information to enter in your PD systems, and the handouts are a separate packet. They're in the facilitator guide as well, but they're also separate. Christina, I see your question, and the next, we'll be talking about the next NHE course on tomorrow's call in New York.
I have a question for Ms. Teresa in New York. I know you mentioned that you're providing the PALS, but it's still in the process to colleges. Do you know what the goal is and the intention? Is it to all the early care educators in colleges of what promoting PALS?
Well, it would be wonderful if we were able to accomplish that. So yes, that would be our goal. But right now, and actually one of our trainers is on the call now, she has a connection to a college in New York State that was interested in the PALS content. So that's kind of where we're starting and hoping maybe that based on providing that training to their, I believe it's an early care certification program. So kind of being able to provide that to the students, that we can show the benefit of it and then work with them to embed it into their curriculum. So something that, we don't necessarily have to be there as the trainers to do it, that somehow we can have it available to them and embedded into their curriculum. And hopefully if that's successful, we can pitch that to other colleges and universities in the state. So kind of just trying it out as like a pilot.
That will be great.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have more to share with you at another time.
Other questions out there?
I was just gonna comment on I had my hand up, but I didn't know if you saw it.
Thanks,
I was just
Laura.
this is Laura. I'm one of the trainers that Teresa was talking about for kind of figuring out how we could provide this content for college students. We're still working that out, but also one of the goals, I think, was also to provide this to early childhood education majors or people who are getting their graduate degree, so that when they did finally land at a facility, they could contact us or we could contact them and say, oh, well, we've provided you with some of the training, here's some more, and now we can work with them at those particular sites. So it's a great way to gain sites as well down the line.
Thanks, Laura, for
Yeah,
clarifying.
sure.
So it's been really exciting to see how PALS has played out in states. The link between different training and technical assistance agencies, how it aligns with other work going on in the states around QRIS and licensure. Tennessee has been one of our really strong states with PALS, and they have had strengthening in their childcare licensure around physical activity and now have the strongest licensure in the nation related to physical activity. And PALS can really support the CCR and R agencies as they help providers meet the licensure standards. So it's just been some exciting things to see how it's a little bit different in every state, but that's one of the beauties in having a training that can be adjusted a little bit. So any other questions for folks out there? Well, let me thank our state leads, Teresa Cohen and Lisa Lauer, for being with us today, as well as our trainers, Carmen Sanchez, Casey Marquette, and Sarah Carter, for sharing their time and their experiences and knowledge with us. It was really great to have your voices today. And welcome. Any questions or interest in PALS, you can reach us at palsece@nemours.org. And we'd love to hear from you. I'll put that in the chat real quick. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I believe Hannah has shared that the recording will be made available to everyone that registered for the session. So thank you so much for your interest in physical activity and supporting children's health. Have a great day, everyone.